There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a British living room the moment a certain three-wheeled Reliant Regal splutters onto the screen. For over 4 decades, Only Fools and Horses has been more than a sitcom. It has been a family member, a Christmas Day fixture, a shorthand for an entire way of talking about hope, hustle, and heartbreak in equal measure. When it first aired on the BBC in September 1981, nobody involved could have guessed they were making something that would still be quoted in pubs, offices, and school playgrounds more than 40 years later. Written almost entirely by John Sullivan, a former scene shifter at the BBC, who had grown up in a working-class family, not unlike the Trotters, the show started slowly, with modest ratings and little fanfare, before growing over its run into one of the most watched programs in British television history. Its 1996 Christmas special, Time on Our Hands, drew an audience of more than 20 million viewers, a figure that remains one of the largest ever recorded for a scripted British comedy, and lines like "Lovely Jubbly," "He who dares wins," and Trigger's insistence that he had kept the same broom for 20 years, despite it having had 17 new heads and 14 new handles, have long since passed into everyday British speech. But behind the chandeliers falling through ceilings and the endless get-rich-quick schemes, the people who brought Del Boy, Rodney, Trigger, Boise, and the rest of Peckham's finest to life lived lives every bit as dramatic, joyful, and, at times, devastating as anything Sullivan ever wrote for them. Some are still with us, older now, wiser, carrying new roles and new sorrows. Others left us far too soon, in ways that shocked the very people who worked alongside them every day. This is their story, as honestly and accurately as it can be told, drawn from public records, interviews the cast and their families have given over the years, and the tributes paid to those no longer with us. David Jason was already 41 years old and a well-established jobbing actor when he first pulled on Del Boy's sheepskin coat and gold medallion in 1981. Born David White in Edmonton, North London, in February 1940, he had spent years building a reputation in shows like Open All Hours and a sharp intake of breath before Sullivan's Peckham Trader turned him into a national institution. Del Boy's blend of relentless optimism, malapropisms, and unshakable loyalty to his family gave Jason a character that would define the rest of his career, but far from being trapped by it. He used it as a launch pad. He went on to play aging Detective Jack Frost in A Touch of Frost for 16 years, and took the role of Pop Larkin in The Darling Buds of May alongside a then-unknown Catherine Zeta-Jones. He was appointed OB in 1993 and knighted for services to acting and charity in 2005. Now in his mid-80s, Sir David has slowed his acting work, but has hardly disappeared. He has written best-selling memoirs, including Adele of a Life, and This Time Next Year, and continues to appear at conventions and in documentaries celebrating the show, including a new archive special marking the sitcom's 45th anniversary. He has had health scares along the way, including a period recovering from surgery that forced him to postpone a fan convention appearance, something he addressed with characteristic Del Boy humor, joking about needing a bionic body part fitted. His marriage to Gil Hinchcliffe, whom he wed in 2005, gave him a daughter later in life, and by all accounts he is found in his 60s and beyond the settled family life that eluded him for much of his younger career. Estimates of his wealth, built from decades of royalties, book deals, and television work, vary depending on the source, with figures reported anywhere between roughly 7 and 10 million pounds. Before Del Boy, Jason had trained for 6 years as an electrician, a trade he only abandoned once acting work became steady, and he has often said in interviews that he never expected the character to become anything more than a job, let alone the defining role of a 50-year career that also included voice work on children's animations, such as Danger Mouse and The Wind in the Willows. In 2006, he was voted the greatest television star of all time in a nationwide poll, a remarkable honor for an actor who, by his own account, simply set out to make people laugh. Whatever the precise number attached to his fortune, there is no disputing that David Jason remains, in the eyes of the British public, the man who is Del Boy, and Del Boy who is somehow also always David Jason. Nicholas Lyndhurst was only 20 years old when he was cast as Rodney, the younger, more sensitive Trotter brother forever being dragged into Dell's disastrous schemes while dreaming of something better for himself. Born in Emsworth, Hampshire, in April 1961, Lyndhurst was already an experienced child actor by the time Only Fools began, having appeared in Butterflies and Going Straight. The chemistry between him and Jason became the emotional backbone of the series, and Rodney's mixture of exasperation, ambition, and quiet decency made him one of British comedy's most beloved characters. After the show ended, Lyndhurst continued, working steadily with roles in Goodnight Sweetheart, The Two of Us, and, more recently, a run on the American revival of Frasier. He married ballet dancer Lucy Smith in 1999, and the couple had one son, Archie, born in October 2000, who grew into a talented young actor in his own right, known to a generation of children for his role in the CBBC comedy So Awkward. In September 2020, tragedy struck the family in the cruelest way imaginable. Archie died in his sleep at the family home at just 19 years old after suffering an intracerebral hemorrhage caused by acute lymphoblastic lymphoma, a rare and aggressive blood cancer that had shown no prior symptoms. His parents later said doctors had told them nothing could have been done and that Archie would not have suffered. Lyndhurst and his wife have spoken about the catastrophic effect the loss had on their family, and in 2025, nearly 5 years on, they announced they would relaunch Faded to Pretend, the streetwear clothing brand their son had founded as a teenager, as a way of keeping his creative spirit alive. Now in his 60s, Lyndhurst lives a quiet, private life in West Sussex with Lucy, largely avoiding the spotlight and rarely discussing the show in interviews, something friends have attributed to how many of his former castmates are no longer alive to reminisce with. Despite the grief that has shaped his recent years, he continues, occasionally, to act, and remains one of the most respected performers of his generation. In late 2025, David Jason addressed the persistent rumors of a rift between the two men, explaining in his own memoirs that a story he had once told about a furious on-set row between them had been wildly exaggerated by others into tales of a lasting feud, when in reality it had been little more than an elaborate practical joke played on the rest of the cast and crew decades earlier. Jason has also spoken about how, following Archie's death, he and his wife Gil tried to be a steady source of support for Lyndhurst and Lucy during the hardest period of their lives, a quiet act of loyalty between two men whose on-screen brotherhood clearly extended well beyond the cameras. Not everyone from that original 1981 cast lived to see the show become the phenomenon it did. Leonard Pierce, born in Paddington in October 1915, was 65 years old when he took on the role of Grandad, the amiable, work-shy elder statesman of the Trotter household, whose gentle, rambling stories gave the show some of its most tender early moments. Pierce was a respected stage and screen actor with decades of experience by the time Sullivan cast him, and his warmth on screen was entirely genuine. Tragically, during filming of the show's fourth series in December 1984, Pierce suffered a heart attack and was admitted to Whittington Hospital in London, where writer John Sullivan visited him. He died from a second heart attack on the 15th of December 1984, at the age of 69. With scripts for the remainder of the series already written around him. The cast and crew were informed on location, and the shock reverberated through the production for years afterward. Grandad's death was written into the show itself, with his funeral forming the emotional core of an episode that remains one of the most quietly devastating in British sitcom history. Pierce's death left Sullivan with the near-impossible task of replacing a character the public had grown to love, and his solution was to introduce Grandad's long-lost brother. Harry Buster Merrifield, born in Battersea in November 1920, had spent much of his working life as a bank manager before turning to acting in his late 50s, discovering a passion for performance that dated back to his time as an entertainment officer during the Second World War. He had never even seen Only Fools and Horses before auditioning for the role of Uncle Albert in 1985, yet his gruff warmth, his booming laugh, and his catchphrase, "During the war," made him an instant favorite, credited by many fans with helping the show survive the loss of Pierce. Merrifield remained with the cast until 1996, becoming a familiar face at charity events and television appearances beyond the show, including work for the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. He was married to his wife Iris for decades. In 1999, Merrifield was diagnosed with a brain tumor and died just 1 week later, on the 23rd of June, at the age of 78. His funeral in Verwood, Dorset, drew nearly the entire surviving cast, and the town later named a road, Merrifield Close, in his honor. Iris passed away 2 years afterward. To this day, whenever a character in the show utters the words "during the war," longtime fans say they can still hear Buster's voice. Those who knew him well have since suggested that a fall he suffered some years earlier, when he tripped over a cable at an award ceremony and struck his head badly, may have been connected to the illness that eventually claimed his life, though this has never been medically confirmed and remains, by his family's own account, an open question rather than a settled fact. John Challis brought to life one of British comedy's great double acts of villainy and charm as Boycie, the sharp-suited, cackling second-hand car dealer and Del Boy's long-running rival and occasional accomplice. Born in Bristol in August 1942, Challis was 39 when the show began, and Boycie's distinctive laugh and permanent air of smug self-satisfaction made him one of the most quotable characters in the series. The character proved so popular that Challis and his on-screen wife Marlene were given their own spin-off, The Green Green Grass, which ran from 2005 to 2009. Off-screen, Challis had been married 3 times before finding lasting happiness with his third wife, Carol Davies, whom he married in 2014, and he wrote a well-received memoir, Boycie and Beyond, reflecting candidly on his career and personal life. In his later years, he battled cancer, continuing to work and make public appearances for as long as he was able. He died peacefully in his sleep in September 2021, at the age of 79, after what his family described as a long illness. His family announced that he had died peacefully in his sleep after a long battle with cancer, and their statement described him as leaving behind a great legacy of work that would continue to bring pleasure and smiles for years to come. Tributes poured in from across the industry, with David Jason calling him a gentleman in the truest sense of the word, and the BBC marking his passing with a run of classic episodes. Before finding fame as Boycie, Challis had worked as a trainee estate agent and attended Ottershaw School near Woking, a background that gave him, by his own admission, a natural feel for the character's blend of aspiration and sharp-elbowed self-interest. Boycie remains, for many fans, the character whose sneering catchphrases they can still recite word for word. Roger Lloyd-Pack turned what could have been a minor comic role into one of the show's most enduring creations. Born in Islington in February 1944 as Roger Anthony Pack, he was 37 when he began playing Trigger, the slow-witted, endlessly good-natured road sweeper whose habit of calling Rodney Dave became one of the series' longest-running jokes. Lloyd-Pack came from a respected acting family and went on to build an impressively varied career beyond Peckham, appearing as Owen Newitt in The Vicar of Dibley for over a decade, as Barty Crouch Sr. in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and in The Old Guys alongside Clive Swift. He was married twice, and his daughter from his first marriage, Emily Lloyd, became a successful actress in her own right. In 2014, Lloyd-Pack died from pancreatic cancer at his home in Kentish Town, London, at the age of 69. His funeral at St. Paul's Church in Covent Garden brought together much of the Only Fools cast, and he was laid to rest at Highgate Cemetery. David Jason said at the time that he was deeply saddened by the loss of a friend and a hugely talented performer, and fans still consider Trigger's blank, cheerful stare, along with his baffling insistence on calling Rodney Dave for the entire run of the series, one of the purest sources of comedy the show ever produced. Lloyd-Pack came from a theatrical family, the son of actor Charles Lloyd-Pack, and had built a reputation as a serious, versatile performer of both stage and screen long before Trigger made him a household name, a reminder that many of the show's most beloved comic performances came from actors with deep, formal grounding in their craft rather than pure comic instinct alone. Kenneth MacDonald played Mike Fisher, the perpetually put-upon but endlessly patient landlord of the Nag's Head, the pub that served as the true beating heart of the Trotters' world. Born in Manchester in November 1950, MacDonald was in his early 30s when he took on the role, and Mike's dry exasperation at the antics unfolding in front of his bar became a quiet, dependable constant across the series. Beyond the show, he took on other television roles, including guest appearances in EastEnders. MacDonald had a family life with his wife and children, and in August 2001, while on holiday in Hawaii celebrating birthdays with his family, he suffered a sudden heart attack and died at the age of just 50. He was buried in a small, private family funeral at Teddington Cemetery because his death came so unexpectedly. Roughly 2 years after the show's original run had ended with its final Christmas specials, the production never had to address his absence